You're watching Story Scroll. Real stories, raw emotions, and endings you'll never forget. Let's scroll into today's tale.
My parents abandoned me at 5 for taking care of my baby sister. My grandfather raised me. He just died, and now they're back. I've been a long-time lurker, but I never thought I'd be posting here. I guess I'm looking for perspective, or maybe I just need to get this off my chest because everything that happened recently dragged up things I thought I'd buried years ago. Some background. I'm in my late 20s now. I haven't seen my parents since I was 5 years old. Not really. Not in any way that mattered. When I was 5, my little sister was still a baby. I don't remember a time when she wasn't crying. Our parents were technically around, but emotionally, they might as well have been ghosts. My dad worked late and drank when he was home. My mom was always exhausted and locked in her room or glued to her phone. If my sister cried, they'd let her cry, sometimes for hours. I didn't understand back then that this wasn't normal. All I knew was that the sound of her crying made my chest hurt. So I did what made sense to a 5-year-old. I tried to feed her with whatever I could reach. I'd rock her. I'd change her diaper as best as I could, even though I barely knew how. I talked to her, sang to her, sat beside her crib until she fell asleep. Looking back, I know that wasn't my responsibility. But at the time, she was my sister and no one else seemed to care. Instead of being grateful, my parents were angry. My mom would snap that I was too needy and that I was obsessed with my sister. My dad accused me of playing parent and said I was making them look bad. They told me to stop interfering, to stay in my room, to let them handle it, even though they never did. The incident that changed everything happened one afternoon I still remember way too clearly. My parents left the house, saying they'd be back soon. Hours passed. My sister cried until she was hoarse. I remember standing on a chair to reach the counter to get formula. I remember spilling most of it. I remember sitting on the floor with her in my lap, terrified she'd choke or stop breathing. When my parents finally came back, I expected relief. Instead, they were furious. They yelled at me for touching her, for making a mess, for thinking I knew better than them. My dad said I was undermining their authority. My mom screamed that I was ruining everything. I cried. A lot. I didn't even know what I'd done wrong. A few days later, they packed a small bag for me and said I was going to stay with my grandfather for a few days so everyone could calm down. I love my grandfather, so I didn't fight it. I hugged my sister goodbye. She was too little to understand. Those few days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. There were no phone calls, no visitas, no verdades, no holidays. Eventually, I realized the truth the adults around me were trying not to say out loud. My parents weren't coming back for me. They took my sister home with them. They kept her. They left me behind. My grandfather never badmouthed them in front of me, but I overheard things. Late-night conversations. Whispers about how my parents needed a clean slate and how it was easier this way. I learned that my grandfather had quietly stepped in legally. Papers were signed. Guardianship was established. No one told 5-year-old me what that meant, only that I was staying. Life with my grandfather wasn't easy, but it was stable. He was strict in a way that felt fair. He taught me how to do chores, how to work hard, how to take responsibility, but he also made sure I was fed, clothed, and safe. He showed up to school events. He helped with homework. He listened. My parents never did. I grew up with no birthday cards, no graduation congratulations, no how are you texts. I'd sometimes hear through extended family that my sister was doing well, living a normal life with them. That knowledge messed with me more than I like to admit. I felt guilty for being safe when she wasn't there with me, even though I had no choice. As I got older, my grandfather started involving me in his work. He owned the house we lived in, some land nearby, and a small rental property. Nothing extravagant, but it was everything he'd built over his life. He used to say things like, "This will all be yours someday," and when I protested, he'd just shrug and say, "You stayed. You earned it." Eventually, everything was handled legally, quietly, without drama. I didn't think much about it at the time. He was healthy. I thought we had years. We didn't. He passed away recently after a short illness. I was with him at the end. He told me he was proud of me, that he never regretted taking me in. I did good. I handled the funeral myself. Every call, every paper, Every decision. I thought that would be the hardest part. I was wrong. At the funeral, I saw two people I barely recognized at first. Older, softer around the edges, crying loudly. My parents. They acted devastated, hugged me like we were a family that had never broken, told people how much they loved my grandfather. I stood there in shock. Then, not even an hour after the service, my dad pulled me aside and asked casually what I planned to do with the house now. My mom nodded and said, "We need to talk about what belongs to the family." That's where I am now. I haven't responded yet, but I can't stop thinking about the fact that they left me behind without a second thought, and somehow think they can come back now and take what my grandfather built for me. I don't know what I owe them, if anything, but I do know I was 5 years old when they decided they didn't want me anymore, and I don't think that's something. Update. I wasn't sure I was ready to write an update so soon after my last post, but things have escalated in a way I didn't expect. After my grandfather's funeral, I thought the nightmare of my parents showing up would end with me quietly closing the door in their faces. I was wrong. A week after the funeral, my parents requested a family meeting. They said it was important to discuss my grandfather's estate. I agreed, though reluctantly, and I made it clear that my sister would be there too. She's an adult now, caught in the middle, and I thought it was better she heard things firsthand rather than through me. From the moment they arrived, it was clear this wouldn't be a calm conversation. My mom had tears streaming down her face, clutching tissues like they were a weapon. My dad looked stern but tense, like he was ready to explode at any moment. They greeted me with hugs that felt rehearsed and hollow. My sister hesitated, giving me a small nod, unsure how to act. Then they started. "We only ever left you with your grandfather temporarily," my mom said, her voice quivering. "He just sort of took you away." My dad nodded aggressively. "You were brainwashed by him. He filled your head with lies about us. You need to understand the truth." I stared at them, dumbfounded. After 20-something years, they had the audacity to claim I was brainwashed? That the man who raised me, fed me, taught me right from wrong, was somehow a villain? Things escalated quickly. My dad leaned forward and said, flatly, "The property should revert to us. You were just a child raised on borrowed kindness. It's time to do the right thing and hand over the deed." I blinked. The deed? They were seriously asking me to hand over the house my grandfather raised me in, the land I grew up on, the small business he built, just because they decided to show up decades late? My mother added, her voice dripping with faux sadness, "It's for the family. You can't just take it all. You owe us for giving you life." My sister flinched. I could tell she was torn, the weight of hearing decades of distorted history crashing over her. My parents began their classic tactic, rewriting reality. They said I had been difficult, that I had made life miserable for them, and that my sister needed them more. They insisted abandonment never happened, that I had somehow run away or refused to be part of the family. My mom sobbed dramatically at intervals, while my dad's tone shifted from calm to aggressive. He leaned close to my sister, saying, "You know, your brother doesn't even remember the truth. He's been manipulated. You should understand." It was all carefully orchestrated gaslighting. Every word, every pause was meant to make me doubt myself or make my sister side with them. But my sister broke first. She admitted quietly, almost whispering, I was told you ran away. I didn't know the truth." That broke something in me. She had spent her entire life believing I had abandoned her, and they had been feeding that lie for years. By the end of the meeting, I realized they had no intention of negotiating. They weren't asking, they were demanding. They wanted the house, the land, the business. They wanted me out, and they expected my sister to choose them over me. I knew I couldn't just sit there and let it happen. I called a lawyer the next day. I needed to understand my legal standing, even though I already knew it was strong. Turns out it was airtight. My grandfather had legally adopted me as his ward shortly after taking me in. The will was ironclad. The property, land, and business were mine. My parents had no legal claim. Zero. Nothing. When I told my parents this, they tried intimidation tactics. They threatened to take me to court. They threatened to drag my name through the mud publicly. They even suggested that my grandfather manipulated me into thinking I owned anything. They clearly expected me to back down. They didn't account for one thing. The truth is powerful, and my sister was finally seeing it firsthand. I pulled out old letters my grandfather had kept, school records, guardianship papers, anything that documented how things had actually happened. I showed them to my sister, letting her read, letting her see the reality. She broke down, tears streaming. She hugged me and whispered, "I didn't know. I'm so sorry I ever believed them. I don't think my parents were expecting this." The control they thought they had over my sister slipped right through their fingers. They tried to argue, to shout, to make themselves the victims. But the truth wasn't theirs to control anymore. The meeting ended with my parents storming out in a rage, insult after insult hurled at me. They called me selfish, ungrateful, and a monster for not giving them what they deserve. My favorite line, of course, was, "You owe us for giving you life." I wish I could say I laughed, but I didn't. I just felt exhausted. They've now officially filed a claim to challenge the inheritance. They've hired lawyers. They've announced publicly that they intend to fight for what's theirs. And I'm preparing to fight back. I don't know how this will end. I don't know if they'll ever stop trying to rewrite history. But I do know one thing. The house, the land, the business, they aren't just property. They're my grandfather's legacy, the life he chose to give me after my parents abandoned me. And no amount of crying, yelling, or pretending can change the fact that I was 5 years old when they decided they didn't want me anymore. Final update. I wasn't sure I'd ever write again about my parents, but after everything that's happened over the past few months, I think I owe it to myself, and maybe to anyone else going through something similar, to share how this ended. After they filed their claim on my grandfather's estate, I braced myself for a long, ugly legal battle. I expected months of back and forth, courtroom drama, lawyers yelling at each other, and my parents trying to twist the truth to their advantage. What actually happened surprised me. The judge dismissed their case almost immediately. He called their claims frivolous and without merit, and went further to reprimand them in court for attempting to take advantage of the legal system. According to the court record, my parents had no legal standing, and everything my grandfather had left behind, his house, land, rental property, and business, was legally and fully mine. Sitting in that courtroom, watching my parents' faces fall as the judge read the verdict, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades: relief, validation, and even a little vindication. They were humiliated publicly. Every insult they had thrown, every tear and dramatic plea, they meant nothing in the eyes of the law. But the biggest relief wasn't the legal victory. It was what happened with my sister. After seeing the truth laid out, the letters, the school records, the guardianship papers, she finally understood. She admitted that she had always felt something was missing, that the connection she should have had with me was fractured. And she apologized. Truly, not in a half-hearted, performative way, but genuinely. We started rebuilding our relationship, slowly but surely. We talk about the things we missed in each other's lives, about our grandfather, about our childhoods, and sometimes just about nothing at all, which feels like freedom. I can finally see her as my sister, not a pawn caught between me and our parents. Of course, my parents didn't give up entirely. After the court decision, they tried every kind of emotional manipulation they could think of. My mother called to warn me of her health issues, as if my concern would make me give in. They both tried to guilt me with religion, saying it was my duty to honor your parents and forgive them. They reminded me constantly, "We're still your parents. You can't just cut us off." I calmly refused each time. I said exactly what I had felt for years. "You stopped being my parents when I was 5. Everything after that was choice. You chose not to be there. I don't owe you anything." It was liberating to say it out loud, to not feel like I was betraying some invisible moral obligation. After that, I visited my grandfather's grave. I stood there, alone for a while, and spoke quietly. I told him I stood up for myself, that I honored what he had built, that I finally understood the depth of his sacrifice. I thanked him for choosing love over blood, for giving me a life my parents refused to give. And for the first time in decades, I felt like I truly belonged somewhere. With the legal side settled, I've begun reshaping the property. The house is being renovated to be a true home, a place that reflects safety and love. The land and business are being turned into something meaningful. Not just a financial asset, but a legacy. I'm planning to start a small scholarship in my grandfather's name for kids who, like me, didn't have the support of their parents. Every time I walk through the house, I remember him. Every corner, every brick, every memory is a reminder that family isn't always who gives birth. It's who shows up, who stays, and who chooses to care. As for my parents, they've left again. This time, there's no property, no leverage, no emotional control. They tried, they failed, and they've disappeared from my life once more. Only this time, I didn't feel abandoned. This time, I felt free.
Thanks for watching Story Scroll. Hit that bell and stay tuned for the next story that will move your heart.